Hi, Athar. Welcome to Network Capital. We are really excited to have you with us. Through the podcast, we speak to leaders in different fields and try and understand what motivates them and why they do what they do. Your career has been an inspiration to millions in India. That's why we thought of reaching out and having a conversation. So, Athar, could you get us started by telling us what you do today?
First of all, thank you so much, Utkarsh, for having me. Uh, I have listened to a couple of podcasts which you shared with me a few days back, and I have personally found them so exciting and so beneficial. I'm sure maybe we could have something meaningful out of this conversation as well. So, again, before starting, thank you so much for having me.
Entirely our pleasure, Athar.
Thank you.
So, yeah, how did you get to doing what you're doing today?
So it's I think my story is a little not very strange, but a little unusual in the sense that uh, back in my school days, I wanted to become a doctor. So even my parents wanted me to become a doctor, and I appeared in the pre-medical examinations that we have. And initially, I joined the government medical college in Jammu also for MBBS course. But at the same time, I was also pursuing mathematics. I was having mathematics and biology in my class 11th and 12th. So then I also got an admission in IIT. And then I decided that I wanted to shift from medical and join IIT. The reason, I think at that point of time, was probably that in J&K in Kashmir, very few students were studying in IITs. IITs was some sort of a big thing for us. So there was huge. It was sort of a dream that if one can get admission in an IIT. So that was one thing, one major reason why I decided to quit the medical school and join IIT. So in IIT Mandi, I joined electrical engineering. I think mostly things were going well. I was my CGPAs and everything were pretty good. At some point of time, I decided that I would go for higher studies. That was the initial thinking.
Higher
Uh,
studies in what? What were you
I
planning?
wanted to do. I was want to do MS in one of the subjects, specialization in one of the engineering subjects only. I had a little bit of inclination towards AI and cognitive modeling. I had done a couple of courses in cognitive modeling, and it was the initial thought I wanted to do that.
I
But
see.
the happy coincidence of sorts happened when I was in my last year, after we completed our seventh semester. So I was back during my vacations, during our semester break. I was at my home, then having this conversation with my grandfather. So, and I was telling him that this is what I want to do. Then during this conversation, then he told me something like this. He said, "Okay, so what's it? Why do you want to do or go for higher studies?" I said, "No, that's a great opportunity. One would be qualified enough. Say, if I get to study in some foreign university, obviously it's a good improvement in the skill set. I can get an opportunity to work in some big multinational, etc." Then there was one question he asked me. In fact, there was a little, uh, not exactly a question, but just a statement in the form of a question.
Right.
He said, from this place, you're the only person who has joined an IIT. I said yes. He said, so now you have two choices in front of you. One choice is to like rise, do well, work in US, maybe make a lot of money and live a wonderful life. So that is you. Another choice is maybe if you can think of coming back, staying in the country, and not only inspiring the people around you, but also trying to actually do something for the people who did not have the same opportunity as you could. So I think this got me thinking to a lot extent. Not that the other profession or maybe high studies in somewhere or joining a multinational would have been a bad option as a career, but
Yeah.
something probably at that point of time I realized probably uh, I want something different, something else, and that's at that point of time I realized civil service is something that I really wanted to pursue.
So this was the third year or the fourth year
It
when
was
you had this.
it was the fourth year. In fact, I already had a couple of pre-placement offers at that point of time, and but which I refused.
So
I
you were
think
thinking of
those are,
MS, you already had jobs, but
yes,
only in the final year, after this defining conversation with your grandfather,
yes,
you decided to start preparing for the Indian Administrative Service, the UPSC exam.
yes, and it also had maybe the conversation had so much of impact on me. The big reason was also the place where I came from.
Right,
Anantnag is seen as one of the most disturbed districts in J&K,
right.
and I was fortunate and lucky enough that I could get into an IIT. I could get into a medical school before that from that very place. I could see many of my friends who used to study with me in my school. They had just left school. Some had dropped out. Some had done a graduation and was just unemployed. So even a couple of my friends who were doing much better in school than me, they're unfortunately their story was also like that. So then this was this something. It made me think that probably things have been a lot unfair. Probably had those people also gotten that opportunity, had they also gotten a bit of guidance or help, probably they would have done much better than me. So then I decided that no, it's let's try something different. Let's try to give it back to the society, and let's try to find out some way to do that.
So I'm going to actually focus on this sentence and try and look at your life before that. So how was school and how was college? Were you always a good student? How was school different from college? What were your learnings there?
Uh, I think when my schooling, I'm not very fond of my school. This is a very strange statement, but somehow looking back at it now, probably that school, those days were not those memorable. The reason being, I was in a school, for example, so the roll numbers they would allot us during for a year were depending on the position or the rank we got in the examination. So if
I
somebody
see.
was rank one, he would get roll number one. If somebody was rank last, he would get roll number 30. So
Right.
somehow those of us who were not doing much better, so our roll
Yeah.
numbers were always a tag that throughout the year they would uh, remind us that probably you are not good enough. So then at the same, that's one side of it. Another side was the corporal punishment, and that was still, I think, the order of the day at that point of time.
Mm-hmm.
Sports and other extracurricular activities, they were a rarity. So in looking at it from the hindsight, I probably think that was not the best place to be as a student. I'm saying this not to disrespect any of my teachers or that institution. They have had, I'm sure, bestest of the intentions in their mind and their work, their hard work. I don't think there's anything to question about. But because now I am in the administrative service, I see schools. I look at it from a different perspective. That's why I don't want to, go by just flattering the schooling that I had. I have learned a lot during my schooling. I have learned a lot the way I was schooled, and
Mm-hmm.
now I am actually trying to make certain things right, probably which should have been at that point of time. But in contrast to this, my college was an extremely wonderful opportunity.
Yeah.
IIT Mandi was a new institution. It had we when we reached the I think the Mandi town for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
nobody had heard of IIT Mandi even in Mandi itself.
I
So
see.
the campus was starting. It was in a rented building. Then gradually, in its own campus, small buildings started to come up. So I was in the second batch. So being a new institute, being a new college, it was a lot of you don't have any tradition actually. There's no culture. There's no tradition. You are the ones who was going. You are the trendsetters. So that was a wonderful thing that one could grow along with the institute. There was nothing forced on us. So in every, for example, if we started a small cultural evening, it became a huge fest. We got an opportunity to name our hostels. They are big buildings right now, and they have the names that we had put them. Similarly, courses and teachers, because it was a very small institute, very few people were there. The whole fraternity was close knit. the director, the faculty, the students, they were like sort of equals, and the sharing of ideas, the way of learning, that was very smooth. So I think I would attribute a lot to the new IIT where I was in, to whatever I have learned.
So
I
the
don't know whether I would have learned the same things in the same way had I been in some other established institution.
So you were a part of an institution that was still, finding its feet, building its culture, and you were happy to be there. But in terms of how you spent most of your 4 years doing, were you academically inclined, or were you somebody who was trying to balance both academia and the cultural activities?
I think I was a little bit more inclined towards academics. Uh, as I told you, the CGPA was fairly good. I would, whenever I got an opportunity to work with some professor or take up some project, I will do that. But at the same time, I also tried my best to sort of take part in cultural activities. I was the cultural secretary in one of the hostels. Then I would, in every cultural evening almost, I would do the anchoring of the event. That was the reason, again, because we were just 100 students, and so anybody who was willing out of those 100, there was not too much of competition for those
Mhm.
cultural activities. So that was. But at the same time, I think I got a very good opportunity to read a lot of books, in the sense that during my school days back in Kashmir, unfortunately, we did not have a good library in the school. So I was really not much exposed to books or literature. But in college, we had a small, we started with a small library. We called it Book Nook. So
Right.
yes, so that gave an opportunity to read books, fiction, non-fiction, and that also opened up a huge universe for me.
Libraries are so important. I mean, I I owe a lot of my writing and reading habits to libraries. That is why, Network Capital is now setting up libraries in different parts, starting with Delhi and London. But the idea or the vision or the dream is to basically build a library in every neighborhood. Why should libraries be only open to, a certain kind of
Yes,
people? We should
yes,
make them as accessible as possible. So
absolutely.
we'll discuss that. So yeah, now jumping forward to the fourth year, you had that conversation with your grandfather, and did you immediately decide to change course, or what was going on in your head, and how did you spend your final year?
uh, I think not immediately, but this got me thinking. This got me really thinking. I remember I left my home during that vacation. When I was in school, I was evaluating it every day. I was talking to people. Some were in civil services. I was talking to my professors. I was surfing the net, looking at the articles people had written. There was incidentally one nice debate on YouTube, probably some NDTV debate back somewhere. BSR Subramanian was one of the participants, so they were discussing this, which career option is better, where which is more impactful. So I started exploring it a bit. And after quite a bit of a research, and I finally made this decision that I think civil services is what I should go for. So it was a very conscious decision after that. So that the conversation with my grandfather, that sort of became that ignition point where I started to consciously actually think this: what should I do and what I should not do. Probably before that, mostly because engineering colleges, normally this is the trend: either you want to join some multinational company or you go for higher studies. Some go for MBAs, so that's a usual trend, and probably I was also in that category till then. But at that point of time, actually started putting an effort in understanding what's it that I should actually do.
And which month was this in the final year when you had this conversation?
It was December. It was December. Our In the 3 months, December, January, and February, we used to have winter vacation because Mandi is in Himachal Pradesh, and we used to have slightly harsher winters.
Yeah,
So we used to have winter vacation rather than summer vacation those days.
yeah.
Probably they have changed it now. But at that point of time, it was like that. So in December, in around mid-December, our semester had ended, and after that, I went home, and during that time, I had this conversation.
And then you started preparing, I imagine. When is the UPSC first exam? When does that take place?
Yeah. So then what happened was, after that I came to Delhi in December itself. So in this I went to this place in Karol Bagh. Um, there are a lot of coaching
Yeah,
institutes, Bagh,
yeah,
and a lot of people prepare there.
yeah,
So I visited a few coaching institutes just to know what all is going on. And one of the institutes, which is more popular one, I visited
yeah.
there, and they told that their batch had started in earlier, I guess in June. In June,
Right.
and other batches had started in October. The exam
Yeah,
was going to be held in. It was going to be held in May.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
the
they were
May, you had about 5 months of
five,
preparation
six.
time, right?
Yes, 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 yes. So then I joined. I joined the one of the institutes during that 2 3 months of my winter vacation that I had. So January and February I was in Delhi. I joined some classes there, got some material, and after that, in March, our last semester in college had started. So I went back to my college with all that material. So then I started preparing side by side.
Yeah. So basically, if I'm hearing you correctly, you had 5 months to prepare for your civils. That's it, right?
Yes, for
5 months for your.
yes, for the first preliminary examination. Because after preliminary examination, we have the main examination. And between the pre and mains, there are another few months. So, because the exam itself is spread over almost 7 8 months. So, for
Yeah.
example, if pre is in May, or say sometimes it's in August also.
Yeah.
So, yeah, then the main examination would be in December. So, you also get time between the pre and mains to prepare for the other part of the exam.
But needless to say, I mean, the preliminary exam is also, the syllabus is really vast and not exactly like an engineering curriculum. So, could you tell us how did you uh, divide your day so that you were able to consume, absorb such a vast amount of information? What were some best practices that you employed?
The first thing, I think this has been my strategy right from the beginning. Before starting preparation for any examination, I spent time trying to understand what this examination is all about. The examination syllabus is of big help. Say if whether it is UPSC civil service examination or the CAT, the exam syllabus is quite elaborate. So the thing first thing from which I started was getting a copy of exam syllabus, going through every bit of it, whatever is there, whatever is in the syllabus, what topics are being covered. It's quite huge, quite long, but at least I got a perspective of what all I have to cover and how much I have to cover. So that also then
So,
one
that
could
was the
replace.
first step.
That was the first step.
And
Uh,
then what happened?
Second step was I also got hold of all old papers, previous 10-year papers, both of pre and as well as main examination. See, this gave a fairly good idea what is actually asked, what is the pattern of examination, what
Uh huh.
one should expect from the examiners. So that again was the beginning part. Second step was to get the right study material. There are a number of good coaching institutes whose material is available everywhere. It's available in Delhi and other places also. So I got the textbooks which I should read. And the some other study material which was there. And the third thing I did was I started to plan. I made my study timetables. There was a daily timetable. I had put some weekly targets and monthly targets, and
Right.
then that I tried to follow as religiously as I could.
Could you share your, what would say an average day look like? And I know every day would be different, but through this question, I want to understand how should people working towards an ambitious target uh,
Yeah.
decide how to spend their day?
Okay, so there were two kinds of days that I had. One is when it was completely off during those sort of vacations when I was not in the college. Those days, my regular schedule would be I would get up at around 6:30, and by 7 o'clock, I would start my reading, my studies. So 7 to 9, I had exclusively kept for reading newspapers.
Mhm.
2 hours per newspapers is extremely important for an examination like UPSC, because current affairs is somehow central to this examination.
Right.
And newspaper is probably the best source for current affairs that we have as of now.
Yeah.
Magazines, of they are a supplement, but newspapers something they give a very good perspective. You can see what all is happening around the country. How is our economy doing? There's page on national issues. There's a world page. What are the major world crises going on? So on day-to-day basis, you can follow them. You can track them. Then you also try to make some notes because as I said, the syllabus is so vast that it's not possible to remember everything. So you need to revise things at a later point of time. So making notes is again very important. So I would make notes as well as read newspaper during the first slot that I had kept around from 7 to 9. At 9, I would have a cup of tea, and if I have to attend some classes that were roughly around some 10 to 12, I will go and attend those classes. After
Yeah.
that, again a small break, and then I would read one particular subject for around 3-4 hours. Complete, at least try to complete one particular topic. So
And you
then
would sit at a stretch for 3 to 4 hours.
at a stretch for at least 3 hours, then take a break after roughly around 2 hours. After 2 hours, I would take a break. But the study time during those days would be from 7 in the morning till around 11 in the night. So that's how it would go.
And filled
Because
with small breaks in the middle.
yes.
Did you
And then
enjoy preparing for the civil prelims, or
yes,
was it a burden?
no, it was not a burden at all. I think I really enjoyed it. It somehow what happens is uh, there's a little difference in what we are preparing here for civil services as compared to what we are preparing for some other examination. Say quantitative reasoning, one would maybe make it really bold, solving all those sums for a while, which
Yeah.
probably may not make much sense to you. But when you are reading, say, you are reading uh, say middle some crisis, say Syrian crisis, you're reading about Syrian crisis, and
Hmm.
you keep on reading, and there's so much of excitement. Okay, what's going on? What has happened next? What has happened next? And you
Yeah.
actually feel so much enriched every day. And I found that thing really addictive. Similarly, if you're reading economics and you're reading monetary policy, okay, this is what has happened, inflation is here, and now this is RBI is doing some rate cuts, and then this is how our government is responding to it, and so on and so forth. So all these things, they you after staying there and reading for around 3 hours, you know that after 3 years you're a more informed person now than you were 3 hours before. And
Yeah.
this is something really remarkable about this examination. Similarly, you're reading about social issues, you're reading about gender issues, you're reading about the child-related issues, and then they have a huge impact on you. You understand the kind of challenges that we are facing, the kind of social disparities we're facing, and they change you as a person. And that's why I think I have really enjoyed and enjoyed this preparation. And had I not been selected, I would have been even I would have been very happy for spending or putting in my 1 or 2 years in this preparation.
So you covered this through a lot of discipline and really trying to understand what the exam is really trying to ask. Um, and so I would imagine you go back to Mandi, finish your final term exams. Concomitantly, you're preparing for these civil services prelims. So you
Yes.
take the civil services exam. Did you have a good feeling? Did you think you did well?
Yes, I think because when I had written my preliminary examination, I started preparing for my main examination the very next day. The reason was I when I saw the paper and how I had performed, I was very fairly confident that I would get through this preliminary examination. So
Did you get a rank in the preliminary exam, or did you get a
normally,
rank only
preliminary
towards?
examination, there is not a rank. It's only qualifying examination. So it's only uh, by clearing the examination, then the marks don't count. It's only that you are eligible for the main examination, which is the
I
actual
see.
examination where you get the marks and everything.
And do you have to select a subject or two for the mains
Subject.
examination?
Yes. That's again a really interesting story. I had taken earlier there used to be two optional subjects. So one had to write some papers of general studies of history, geography, current affairs, environment, art and culture. They were in the part of the general studies. And people also had to choose two optional subjects. So they are specialized papers. And but at our time, the one paper was cut down, so we had only one subject to choose, and I had taken philosophy as my optional
Okay.
paper. Yes.
So you started, and why did you pick philosophy?
Uh, it had a couple of reasons. One reason was when we were in college, we used to have some humanities courses, and one of those courses I had taken was socio-political philosophy. We had
I
a
see.
we had a professor, Professor Subramaniam. He was a scholar in German philosophy, so he had taken this course, and I had signed up for that course. And this was somehow at the back of my mind that probably I have a little bit of initiation into this subject. The other reason was when I was exploring what optional to take, I found that the syllabus of philosophy is slightly smaller, slightly lesser, because
Hmm.
I had
Because you
less
had
time
so
to
little
prepare.
time.
Yes, so I thought probably I would be able to do this. I'll be able to take this as an optional. So these were the two main criteria that I
Yeah.
that I.
Yeah, but of course the syllabus is huge. Like I have seen some people take years and years and years of preparing and taking the exam again. So one has to keep a lot of factors in mind. So you've picked philosophy, and how much time did you have to prepare for the mains examination, and how did you prepare?
We had around 3-4 months.
Right.
But then this is a little. What happened was my general studies I had because I had been preparing it before the preliminary examination also. So it
And
was
can
my
I can
strong.
I can I just add for the benefit of our international audience?
Yes,
So
yes,
when
ab-
Athar is talking about philosophy, he doesn't mean Indian philosophy or Western philosophy. Basically, as much as I understand, they can ask anything under the sun as part of the question paper. Athar, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
yes, yes. It has actually 3-4 parts to
Right.
in this exam. In this exam, the first part is Indian philosophy. So
Hmm.
where we discuss about Indian philosophers, uh, like say Mimamsa, Sankhya, the yogic philosophies, the Vedantic philosophers. Another part is Western philosophy. So where we start with Socrates and Plato and Socrates, and then rationalism, empiricism, the modern and postmodern philosophers. So there's one part exclusively of Indian philosophy, one part exclusively of Western philosophy. Then there is third part, which is of socio-political philosophy, which is mostly the application or applied aspect of the philosophy or metaphysics and epistemology that we are studying. And then there is fourth part, which is philosophy of religion, where we study the major religions of the world, where we discuss most of the questions which somehow form the heart and soul of a religion or a faith. So these are the broadly four parts
Not
of
a
the.
small syllabus, one would say.
Not a small one, which I realized a little later once I had started reading it and preparing it. Though it was very interesting, very enriching, but at the same time, philosophy is such a thing that you cannot just read it, one in one go, and or one reading is not enough. You have to spend time trying to understand the philosopher, what is he trying to do. Every word has a different meaning for a different philosopher. Every concept has a different meaning for a different philosopher. So there's a progression among philosophers. So, as for example, there's a Descartian philosophy. It has some loopholes. So Spinoza tried to come and tried to come up with his own philosophy so that he could improve upon Descartian philosophy. Then there was Leibniz, who in turn came and found some loopholes in Spinoza's philosophy and tried to come up with his own version and improvement over the Spinoza. So those all things, I think, relatively, when we compare it with say history or any other subject, where it's mostly facts. It's in philosophy. There's a lot of attention to detail. A lot of understanding is also involved.
And the great good thing is that you still remember all of it, which is awesome.
No, because after that I had to read it so many times that it somehow has stuck to my mind. But the best part, which I am really happy about, is by taking philosophy as an optional, because I had no background of any of the humanity subjects per se. Because in my school, 11th, 12th, we in schools we hardly have anything in the name of actual literature, or actual philosophy. In 11th and 12th, mostly sciences. College, it was engineering.
Yeah.
But while after taking philosophy as an optional, it sort of opened a open window to a very different universe. So philosophy is all around. That's why probably we have doctors in philosophy in every subject.
Yeah.
So it was a good thing, and I'm really
Yeah.
happy.
And what were you reading in terms of philosophy, these four components that you described? You could have read the original text, you could have read interpretations. Do you have any advice for people on what books to choose and what material to choose?
Yeah, there are both things. For example, the original text, but what happens is you need really sufficient time if you actually want to study philosophy from the original textbooks.
Yeah.
So original writings of the philosophers. That's a little time consuming, but not a bad not a bad idea. So it's anybody who is preparing for this examination or anybody who is reading philosophy. So uh, there's a trade-off. There's a trade-off. One is you have a time constraint, and another is the depth. On the other axis, we have the depth to which you can read particular philosopher. So there is secondary lot of secondary textbooks. For example, Western philosophy. We read this book by Y. Massey, a critical critique to the Western philosophy by Y. Massey, or we read Bertrand Russell. So these where we get a good insight into the different philosophers at one place. So secondary textbooks are definitely a big help. Similarly, there are a lot of institutes also which provide material whereby they have filtered out uh, what is important from the exam point of view, and if you don't have time or you don't want to read too much, then you can go with them also. But I used a sort of mixed strategy. Number one was textbooks and the study material which is made available by different institutes. That was there, and at the same time I also tried to read the original philosophers as much as I could.
Yeah. So you had about 3.5 months for your mains preparation. Um,
Yes.
when did you complete the first version of your, like, when did you say that, okay, my syllabus is complete now, I should revise? Or was it something that you were doing alongside? And were you making notes? If yes, how did you like synthesize all of this?
Yes, I think I was making notes alongside. So whatever I used to read, I had kept separate notebooks. So topic wise, I would make my own notes after studying books, and the revision was again a very periodic thing. So if I read some new chapter today, I would make sure that in within 3-4 days I can revise it, because philosophy, again, as I told you, is such a subject that if you don't maintain a continuity in what you are reading initially, probably there's a lot of chances that things will slip out of your mind and you will have to read everything from the scratch again. So I had this strategy that I would keep on revising things repeatedly.
Got it. So the D Day comes. How did you think you did on your mains examination, and what mistakes do you think that people make that you avoided?
Uh, uh, that day, I think the main examination is it's spread over a few 4 5 days, because there are around 9 papers that we have to write. The four of those papers are of general studies. First paper is mostly about history and geography and sociology. Second paper is mostly about political science and national issues. Third paper is more about economics and environment science, science and technology. That forms the third part. Fourth paper is a paper on ethics and aptitude. Then we have an essay paper also, two language papers, and finally two papers of the optional subject. For example, I
Right.
had taken philosophy, so two papers of philosophy. So
So you had to not only study philosophy in the 3.5 months, but all the other subjects.
yes, yes. So our syllabus includes, say, economics. We have to read Indian economy. We have to read macroeconomics and microeconomics both. There's money market. There is how the monetary policy works, how the fiscal policy works, global trade, world trade, all regional organizations that all form part of it. Similarly, in politics, the constitution, not only of India but also of many other countries, the American Constitution, the UK Constitution. Similarly, history, Indian history, ancient, medieval, modern, world history also, and the what we call as modern period. in India, which we normally take from 1947 onwards, that also forms part of it. So it's quite almost everything under the sun. Whatever subjects are there, they form
But
part of it.
interesting,
But
hopefully
very interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting.
So 4 5 days, how did you think you did, and if you say didn't do well on one particular paper, or how did you bounce back?
Yes, I think initial four papers were that of general studies, and I think I had this confidence that I have done really well because I did not miss any questions. Here, what normally the mistake people do is say we have 3 hours and we used to have 20 or 25 questions in a paper that we have to
Right.
complete in 3 hours, and there's a
Yeah.
word limit also for every question. So
Hmm.
sometimes what we do is we start and we put a lot of attention to the initial few questions,
Yeah.
but by the time we have reached the 10th or 15th question, our time is almost up. So
Hmm.
the strategy which I adopted was I wanted to make sure that my question number one is as good as my question number 20, and
Yeah.
so that was my strategy. I did not beat around the bush. I saw the question, tried to understand it, then try to answer to the point without putting any undue stuff into my answers. So that's probably the one thing that
So
helped.
being very pragmatic about all
Yes,
questions, time, what you're putting in. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So then we also have essay. Essay is very important paper.
Hmm.
Normally, general studies papers, often what happens is most of the people do quite good. But essay, we have to write 2 essays, and one essay is roughly, the word limit is around 1,000 to 1,500 words. So essay paper again. So normally one essay is a little philosophical of kind. So they may give some philosopher's quote and leave it there. The other essay is a little bit more of say current affairs based. It may be about something which is going on around. It may be on, say, social media, sometimes science and technology, something. So the 2 essays again we had to write, and I think I did fairly well in those 2 essays also. So in essays, what I the strategy I adopted was, say, we had to write 2 essays in 3 hours. So that means about 1.5 hours for one essay. So before writing that essay, I spent almost 10, 15, 20 minutes first making up the outline in the of the essay. So what is it that I am going to start with? What would
So
form
10
my
minutes each or 20 minutes each?
20 minutes each, 20 minutes each, at least 20 minutes each,
Wow.
trying to brainstorm what I'm going to write. So I would start normally writing the essay only when I had the conclusion in my mind, how I'm going to conclude this essay. So then I would start
And
writing.
why did you do that? That's really interesting, by the way. I mean, but tell me more about the thought process.
Yes. So what normally happens is, because you have to write, say, 1,500 words, and there's a given topic. Topic is what is there. So you choose one of the 5 topics and then decide to write on that. So when you are normally writing a long write up, there's tendency that you may say deviate from what is the intention or what is the intent of the topic. So to avoid that, I would make sure that initially I make this outline. That these are the things, these are the topics which I'm going to touch. These are the areas I'm going to cover. So that ensured that I don't deviate from the topic and I stick to the topic. And it make it, the write up is more coherent and much more in the line with what the examiner is expecting. So that was the reason why I tried to spend my initial 20 minutes only brainstorming what I'm going to write, made a brief rough outline of it, uh, what's going to be the conclusion, and then started to write. So it really helped me in that sense. I think I could write both the essays quite good.
That's awesome. And your those optional papers, did they go well?
Yeah, optional papers, but I wasn't very sure about them. The
Hmm.
thing what happened was, in philosophy, you actually have to remember a lot of terminology. You have to remember a lot of exact sentences also. This is very true for Indian philosophy particularly. There's a lot of Sanskrit words are used in Indian philosophy. One have to use them verbatim because otherwise they wouldn't make sense. So you can't write in it literally in your own stuff. So you
Hmm.
have to use terminology of the philosopher. Because
Hmm.
I had probably less time, I could not revise it much. Sort of struggled a bit in philosophy at that point of time.
I see. But like overall, your papers conclude, and When did you hear back that you've been invited for an interview?
It was about 2 months after that. About
So
two or
two
3 months.
months, 2 months back, 2 months after you hear back, and you've made it through the interview. How did you feel, and what did you do next?
I was very elated, but I would want to mention one thing here. Uh, the day my main examination was over, I did not sit back. I actually
Hmm.
started preparing for my preliminary examination.
I see. That's really good because you thought that um, you
But
might
maybe
get in,
I
and
get through. If I get through, wonderful. If I don't, then I have to write the preliminary examination again. So
yeah.
then I decided that I'll why not start preparing for the preliminary examination in case I have to write it. I'm well prepared. In case I don't have to, I'm it's things are even good. So that's what I did at that point of time.
So yeah, so you basically you were sure that if this didn't work out, you will still not take your job or go for your masters, but you will take the civil service examinations again.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, got it. So you started preparing, and how did you prepare? And walk us through your interview preparation strategy.
Okay. In UPSC interview, again, like most of the interviews, it's a personality test. And normally I focused on two areas. Number one is my biodata. And normally at the time of our main examination, we submit a detailed application form. It has all the details: where I have studied, what I have studied, which place I come from, which village, which district, which state in India I come from, uh, what have I studied during my graduation or during my college or university, what are my hobbies, what are my interests, do I play some sports or not. So all these things are written in that detailed application form. And normally when we go for the interview, the interviewers, there's a board of around 6 people. They have a copy of that detailed application form in front of them, and it forms a very integral part of whatever is asked in the interview. Say for example hobby, so they somebody has written uh, say Carnatic music, so they would ask about Carnatic music a lot. So this forms a very pet subject of pet area of interviewers. So I prepared my detailed application form quite in detail. I tried to the time whatever time I had before my interview, and that was around 2 months before the results of mains was out and the interview date which I had been assigned. It was around
Yeah,
2 months. In those 2 months, I tried to know each and everything about what I could gather. Say my name, what is the meaning of this name, my
right.
date of birth. So is there any significance to it? My village, where has
Wow,
the
that is really
name?
detailed.
Yes,
That is like I've
my
never heard this kind of question. But yes,
So my village. So why? What about my village? How did it get its name? My district. So what are the important places in my district? Who are the important figures? Are there any historical incidents, events, or people related to my
so
district?
hey,
My
Athar,
state. Yeah.
were you being paranoid, or do these questions actually come up once a while?
Uh, they I think they come up once a while, and the idea is that probably one, if one expects to join an Indian administrative service, one should know about himself quite well. This is something probably this is a fair something. It's a very fair thing to ask.
I
Say
see.
if my name is Amir, I should know what does this mean. If I don't
Yeah.
know the meaning of a name, that would be really not high of me. So similarly,
Yeah, it's
JNK.
very different from, say, a lot of people say in the US, who would like, if your name is Tom, it may not mean anything apart from the three letters coming together.
Yeah, but that also one needs to have that clarity also. It's quite possible, say his name is Jag, and that word actually doesn't mean anything, but one has to be clear about whether it means anything or
Yeah.
not. So that similarly the state I come from, it's now a UT. We used to have a state of Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir, again, it's very politically very sensitive. It's been so much in the news, so they would ask about Jammu and Kashmir. I also prepared about, for example, the handicrafts in my place in my district.
Hmm.
JNK is known for its
Hmm.
historic, its tourist places. It's known for its handicrafts. It's known for its culture, its cuisine. So I tried to know more about it, try to see these things. I spent hours and hours. I remember going to the shops in my district. So there's a handicraft shop. I would go and sit with that handicraftsman and try to understand, okay, what is this? Tell me more about this. I did not know many of those things, but the idea was to know as much as I can. The
So
another
this
part.
exam sort of forced you, or like rather was a forcing function that enabled you to know as much about yourself and about your country and where you come from and all of that.
Yeah, this is because I think these things have been routinely asked in the examination, in the
Hmm.
interview. So anybody who's preparing for civil services knows that this is one area he has to prepare. So probably the starting point is not good, but the end result here is really good. That through this examination, through this interview process, whether the a question is asked in the interview or not, one is able to at least know more about the place where he comes from. He's able to know more about the people he is part of.
So that is one component of the interview, or that
Yes,
is the interview?
that is one component.
Okay,
Maybe
okay,
it's quite possible they may not ask anything from this background or biodata of a person. Another
yeah.
very interesting and most commonly asked aspect is the current affairs, current issues. So international relations, international issues, uh, environment and ecology, some national issues, social issues. They would ask about that also. I remember when my interview was there, they spent a lot of time discussing with me the Syrian crisis. The Syrian crisis was in the news during those days. It was a lot more
Right.
in the news. So they would ask about, okay, tell us about, say, who are the main players in the Syrian crisis? Tell us about what is this crisis all about? What is the role of US? What is the role of Russia? Say similarly, where does Iran fit in? What is the role of Saudi Arabia? Where do you see the international organizations? What's their role? What is UN doing? Do you think
Yeah.
it's making any impact or not? Similarly, Libyan crisis would also started during those days. So about Libyan crisis also, Ukraine crisis had slightly sort of mellowed down. They asked me about that also. At the same time, there were some issues in India which were in the news. Some related to judiciary, some related to the gender issues, because the a couple of years back we had the Nirbhaya rape issue, which had taken the whole imagination of India. Then they would ask a lot of questions about that also, about Indian society also.
So, Athar, is the goal of the questions to know whether you know the subject, or is it to know your opinion, or is it to know your problem solving methodology? All of the above, none of the above. Like, how
I think
should the
I
students
think
who are thinking
it,
about it should go about?
I think it is all of the above, in the
Hmm.
sense that, say, if there is something really important going on, they expect a person to know about it. Say, if there's a major crisis going on, they know that you have studied, you have been preparing for a year. You should at least know the basics about it. So, but at the same time, they may ask some other facts or about some other incidents or things which one may not have come across, and it's quite okay if one doesn't know them. And we sometimes they ask a question and we say, "I'm sorry, sir, I don't know about this. I'm sorry, ma'am, I have never heard about it." So that's quite absolutely quite okay, and they in fact appreciate if one gives us very honest answer that you don't know. uh, that's one part. And second part is they also try to discuss certain issues with you, trying to know the underlying value system. Say for
Hmm.
example, one they might start with say issue about whether Indian army should allow females in combat roles or not. So
Hmm.
then a person may try to give some answer, yes or no, whatever his opinion is. Then they
Hmm.
would try to prod a little, dig a little bit on what one has answered, trying to know whether this person actually believes in equal gender rights, or he is just trying to make up an answer. Similarly, whether it's a regional issue, whether it's any political issue, they sometimes ask a question. They would one answers, and depending on what the answer is, they would try to dig in it further. So to see what is the underlying value, whether this person actually believes in democracy or not, whether he believes that authoritarian rule is more useful than democratic one. So my here advice would be number one, because see, when we talk about certain principles or certain values, be those democracy, be those of equality, be those of humanism, so all these values one should imbibe them as an individual, rather than just trying to make up answers using these words. And then whatever question anybody asks, he would always have a very balanced answer. But if a person does not actually believe in gender issues, if he actually does not believe in gender equality, so I think after a series of questions, he will end up saying what he actually believes in.
Fantastic advice, Athar. So your interview lasted how long, and how did you think you did?
I think the interview lasts for around 1 hour 45. No, around 45 minutes. Around,
45 minutes. All right.
yeah.
And how did you think you did?
I think I did pretty. I thought I did pretty well, because there was the questions they asked, I could fairly answer, try to answer every one of them. They asked me questions about J&K. They asked me questions about the handicrafts of J&K. Pashmina wool. Pashmina shawls are very famous in uh, Kashmir. They asked me about Pashmina industry. How is it doing? What are the major challenges it's facing? Apples of Kashmir are quite famous. So they asked me about apple industry also. There was one very interesting question which one of the interviewers asked was, what has been the impact of globalization and liberalization on apple industry in Kashmir?
Mhm.
So, I think
And
they were
how did you, I'm not asking you to reproduce your answer, but
uh,
what was your mental model of
my
solving that problem?
mental model was, first of all, say, like any other sector, uh, when we because apples are something I have grown up with them. I belong to an apple cultivating family. So while now apples could be exported to many other countries, but at the same time in Indian markets also we have apples coming from every other country. So while it had opened so much of market for our apples, it also had opened market for other countries also. Now we had many more varieties of apples which we could grow in our place. So it was sort of the
So
mental model was
competition
try to
grows,
analyze.
consumer
It
choice
was more
grows, price goes
competition.
down.
Yes. So it had forced us to compete also, and it had at the same time made us feel a little scared whether we'll survive the market competition or not. But at the
Yeah.
same time, it also opened a lot of opportunities for us as well. So the answer
Yeah.
was in this way. Try to give a little analysis about what positives the industry had achieved because of these, and the negative aspects also, where it had given a challenge to the industry per se.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a question that can be answered in very different ways. And hats off to you for thinking of all the things in 45 minutes. So you did well. When did you hear back um, from the
It
examination committee?
again
And
about another couple of months after that.
another cup. So they make us wait. The Indian Administrative Service or
Yes,
UPSC committee, they make the
yes,
applications wait.
yes. So
So,
the progression is like this. In preliminary examination, almost around 7-8 lakh people fill the application form. So
so
from
that's
that
so for
8
so
lakh
that's
people,
close to a million folks for our international audience. I'm just
yes,
translating that. It's close to a
yes,
million people take the exam.
that almost yes. And then they have to select. They select around, I guess, 3 times the number, around 4-5 thousand people for the main examination.
Right.
Around 10,000 people in fact for the main examination, out of that almost a million. And finally for the interviews, they select around 3,000 people.
I
So
see.
from around 8 lakh to
So 3,000 out of basically a million, close to,
yes,
get
are
selected
interviewed.
for
Yes,
the mains,
for the interviews, for
for
the
the
interview.
interview. Sorry. And
Yes,
out of the interview, how many people get placed in some position in the government?
roughly around 1,000, roughly around 1,000. Out of those 1,000, uh, around 180 people are selected for the IAS, Indian Administrative Service,
Yeah.
Around 30-40 are selected for the Indian Foreign Service,
Yeah.
and another around 80-90 are selected for the Indian Police Service. And then there are other allied services, including Indian Revenue Service, Indian Defense Account Service, Civil Account Service, and others. So in total, all the combined is around 900 to around 1100. It varies from year to year, depending on the vacancies.
So, how did you find out about your position? Walk me through the exact moment, because uh, I want
Yeah,
the listeners to know how this entire thing works.
there's a little one more twist was to the story. So the
Oh,
result came in
please.
September. Yeah, the result came in September,
Hmm.
and I found my number was 570.
Uh,
It was 570. Yes,
okay. Yeah.
I was allotted Indian Railways service. It's in
Okay.
again not the IAS at that
Yeah.
point of time.
Yeah.
So then, I had a choice whether to join this service here or prepare again or write the exam again.
Yeah.
So then I decided to choose the second option. I thought I'll write the examination again because I wanted to join the Indian Administrative Service.
So you were not happy with a rank of 570 out of a million people.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
you decided to take the year off.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But not for the sake of rank per se, but
because
because
you wanted to do it. Sure, fair enough. Yeah.
yes, because the rank 570 had landed me up in the Indian Railway Traffic Service, which Indian Railway Traffic Service. But I wanted to join the Indian Administrative Service.
All right. So,
So
yeah, so you sit down and basically go through this entire process all over again.
yeah, yes. And then the next year, I got rank two.
So you stood second out of 1 million people. And how did you find out that you stood second? How did you react? Did you start screaming? Were your parents around? How did you tell your folks and your family?
Actually, I was in Lucknow at that day, and we were expecting the results would be out in a couple of days. So we'd have the UPSC website opened on our mobile phones all day long, trying to refresh it again and again. Maybe the result would be there. It is declared on its website, on the website of UPSC,
Yeah,
Union Public Service Commission's website. So that day I was with my friends in Lucknow. There's a railways academy, in fact, there in Lucknow. I had they've given option that if you want to write an examination again, you can take leave for that period of time, and after that. So I had joined that academy after giving another interview. The interview this time, the second interview. I had joined the
yeah,
service which was allotted first time
yeah.
after the second interview. So at
I
that
see.
point, I was in that academy.
Hmm.
So and incidentally, around 30 other friends of mine had also written the examination there.
I see.
Then the result was out. I was with my friends, and while scrolling down, I found my name, which was second in the list. So the very moment I took out my phone, called my dad, and it was he could not believe it. And then after that, I think it was a roller coaster ride after that.
So who
And
was first?
first was Tina Dabi, and
I
she
see.
now my wife. We both of us married after that.
Yeah, I was proud to celebrate the wedding of two of my friends.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. You were there to share the
No, of
joy.
course, it was really special. Athar, I'm going to be changing course now, because I think the first part of this interview is, of course, to dive deeper into your student and preparation life. But now you are part of the Indian Administrative Service. You are trying to solve different problem, different policy issues.
Right,
Um,
right.
let's split this into two parts. One is this training that you guys go through in Missouri, I believe. What
Yes.
what is it like? How is it structured? And in that, if there are some highlights you'd like to share, that'll be great.
Yes, of course. Our training roughly goes for around 2 years. It's a 2 year long training,
So you live in
and
Missouri for 2 years.
not completely in Missouri for 2 years. So the training is divided into four parts. The first part is called foundation course. The foundation course is around for 3 months. It's for 100 days, and it's in the entire time one has to spend in Mussoorie. We have a Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. It's
Yeah.
an academy in Mussoorie, which is one of the hill towns in the northern part of our country. So there, these first 3 months we have to spend. The highlight of this foundation course is it is not separate. It's not separate for different services. As I told you that in this examination, people are selected for different services. One of them is Indian Administrative Service. The another is Indian Police Service. Another is in Foreign Service. Similarly, Indian Revenue Service. So these 5-10 services people are selected in. And during this 3-month foundation course, everybody is together. Everybody is in the same academy, same classrooms. They study same thing. And these 3 months are also filled with a lot of activities like trekking, hiking, a lot of cultural activities. We go for about a week-long Himalayan trek. The groups entirely they are made of the people mixed from different services. So the main focus during these 3 months is not on academics per se. It's mostly on building sort of camaraderie between the people who are selected in different services. It's about building that team building. It's about making friends. It's about building those bonds between each other. So this is the initial 3 months, and whatever is taught in the class, that is something a little bit more generic. Some part of law, some economics, some management, which is equally helpful to people in all the services. So this is the first part, which is called foundation course, and this is the
Is this
most.
where you met Tina as well? Tina and you
Uh,
met at the foundation
no,
course?
no. We Tina and I had met, in fact, the on the second day of our result.
Okay.
The
That's
story
so
is that
interesting.
every year the prime minister or the minister of personnel, government of India, they invite the first three qualified candidates who have got the first three ranks, first rank
Right.
1, 2, 3. They invite them over a breakfast or lunch in North Block, Delhi. So that's the first time when we three of us, two of us met for the first time. Was second day after the result at
So
the
directly, so
North.
you had your first meeting with the Prime Minister.
We had the first meeting with the Minister of Personnel, Mr. Jitendra Singh. Yeah,
I see.
at his office, at his office, at his office. So that's where we met for the first time, and we sort of, I think, started became friends probably at that very moment. We exchanged our numbers, then met later on. I happened to go to her house also that day itself and
Hmm.
we connection, and then we kept in touch. And I think within a month or so, then we started sort of dating. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
then,
it was love at first sight, or love
yeah,
at the first few sights.
I think love at first sight.
No, that's so happy and delighted for both of you. And
Thank
also,
you.
this process of meeting this minister and prime minister is such an apt reward for the copious amounts of work that you all put in to get in.
Indeed,
So that's
indeed,
awesome.
indeed, indeed. It makes you feel very special the first time, and that probably you've done something. Though the feeling later on subsides gradually, but
But still a precious one, regardless. Um, so as we move along, so you described this foundation course plus other stuff that goes on at LB at this Lal Bahadur Institute. Um, Tell me about how, if at all, it prepares you for the posting, and how is what you're doing today related to, or like how are you trying to actually fulfill
yes,
the
yes.
duties as a civil servant?
I'm sorry, I think we missed a little bit here. Because I was telling you there are four parts of the training. The second
Yeah.
part of the training are phase one of the training, which takes place in the different academies. So police, the training for IPS and police service would be in the police academy. The administration service, the training is in Mussoorie itself. So in here, the training is more focused on what we are going to do on ground. It's about, say, about the revenue laws. It's about the health. It's about education. It's about public works. It's about the general administration. It's about, say, policing and law and order. It's about child welfare and social welfare. So all there are different modules in this second part of the training which we are taught to us, and they are more related to our job profile per se. And then the third part of the training is called district training. We're actually sent to the district, and we are assigned to one of the districts as an assistant collector. In India, we have the system of districts. So every state has a number of districts, and each district is headed by uh, an official called a district collector or district magistrate. So that district collector is one point person in a district. So he has to look after the law and order. He looks after the say public works that are going on. He looks after the health. He looks after education. He looks after the land revenue. He looks after implementation of law and order. He has n number of activities. So he's a one point person in a district who does all those activities. So we're assigned to one of the collectors as an assistant collector. So for 1 year, we assist him. We see what he does, how do the things work in a district. We also given some independent charges for like a BDO at the SR, which are slightly subordinate positions to a to a district collector. So we get to know how each and everything functions in a district. How is the ground on ground? How the policies are implemented? How is law and order maintained? Okay, how revenue disputes settled. Okay, what is the machinery? How does it work? How do the finances work? So that training goes for another around 1 year in the district. So this part of the training is actually which prepares for us for what we are doing right now.
Oh, that's awesome. Your role seems a lot like a CEO on the ground, but who's responsible not for dollars, but for somebody who's welfare of the people. It seems like a very execution centric role. Is that right?
Yes, it is. That's right. The job is more about implementation. It's so in say for example, right now I am a sub-divisional magistrate or a sub-divisional officer. So every district again will be divided into a couple of subdivisions. So the first posting we get is as an SDO, sub-divisional officer. So the hierarchy would be like this. So in a state, there would be a number of districts, and in every district, there would be a number of subdivisions. And the first portfolio that we hold is that of a subdivisional officer. And as subdivisional officer, our role is again multifaceted. In a subdivision, which would roughly be around 100,000 people or so, or maybe in some places 200,000 people in a subdivision, in a subdivision. So my role would be to ensure, say, law and order is maintained in that subdivision. So I work as a magistrate also. My work is also as a revenue presiding officer of a revenue court. So there's a revenue court in which land disputes are instituted, and I have to decide those revenue cases. So as a law officer also. The other role is that of, say, ensuring education in schools is good, ensuring that the health services are good, ensuring that whatever public works are being undertaken in that subdivision, they are done to in a well quality. I have to go and keep on checking them, examining them. My role is also to ensure that, say, pension benefits which are being given to the people, they are being delivered properly, to ensure that we have this National Food Security Act, under which food ration is given to people, is given to different people. I have to ensure that the delivery of that is again smooth and seamless. Similarly, when we have an election, so an SDO, subdivisional officer, works as a returning officer. He's the one who conducts the election in that particular constituency. So again, it's a multifaceted job that one has to deliver.
No, it seems like a really complicated execution heavy job. Um, do you get to engage with the central government at all? And who forms policy in India? Because a lot of
Uh,
people who are thinking of making careers in public policy, they want to understand uh, this question, whether it happens at the state level, at the central level, both. When will the work that you do actually translate to policy changes?
policy making at the central government level, another is at the state government level. The catch here is whether the policy is being made by the central government or the state government. it is implemented in a block, it is implemented in a subdivisional officer. So while as an SDM or an SDO, one does not have a direct role in policy formulation, but the key, it's the key part of policy implementation implementation in our country. So we before formally taking a charge in a subdivision, we are given a 3-month tenure with the central government as assistant secretaries to the government of India, where we get a little exposure to how policy formulation is done, how different policies are made, what is the philosophy behind those policies, how things are expected to work at that level. Because in India, I think the major source of funding for different programs is government of India, and those policies are made largely for the entire populace of the country, for all the states and union territories of our country. So those 3 months of our before coming to the state, joining back in the state formally as officers, those 3 months are give us an opportunity to understand what all is going on during that policy formulation phase. And then when we come to subdivision or a district as a subdivisional officer, we get to implement those policies, and one could relate to the.
Now, we're coming towards the last part of the interview, and while it's not possible to go into all aspects of your work, let's pick the one aspect that you mentioned in the earlier part of this podcast, which is education. I know that you're deeply involved in the education space. You spoke about it when we were together giving that TEDx in Rajasthan. Um, how is it that as an IAS officer, you are trying to change the education paradigm that you didn't like very much when you were in high school or school?
Uh, um, there's one unfortunate part of fact about uh, our country is that the quality of education, the access to quality education, is not to everyone. We have some of the finest education institutions, both schools and colleges, but again, that they are accessible to only say 5 or 10% of our population. Similarly, what has happened in past couple of decades, in fact, is that there's been a lot of privatization of education in our country. More than I think 30-40% of our children they attend private schools, and these though some of these private schools they impart fairly decent quality of education, but they are very costly, and it's not possible for every person, especially the ones who are in the lower rungs of our society, to send their children or their kids to these private schools. That again leaves the role of our government institutions, government schools or public schools extremely important. So what I saw was the first day, the first few days when I joined as the SDM or SDO in the place where I'm presently working. I spent a little time
Which
visiting.
place is this?
It's a place called Badnor in district Bhilwara of Rajasthan state. So the state is Rajasthan, the district is Bhilwara, and the subdivision is Badnor.
Right.
So, but when I visited those schools, I think I was pained quite a lot that while we are discussing on social media and other places about the pedagogic techniques, when we are discussing whether our education is making us productive or less productive, when we are having this lot of discussions at a philosophical level, and in those schools we do not even have our basic facilities. For example, the least one could expect is a decent place to sit on, decent say a small bit of furniture, and in those schools I couldn't find even some basic furniture. Teachers were there, the classroom was there, but the condition of those classrooms was not good at all. So the first thing which I started to focus on was trying to improve this basic infrastructure in those classrooms. At least make those classrooms look a little bit more cleaner. Have some basic furniture available in those schools. And then again, what happens is that at my level as an SDO, we don't have special funds at our discretion. So the fund is usually a budgetary process which happens annually. So I do not have any funds available. Then I tried to employ this crowdsourcing technique. What we did was we selected two schools in my subdivision, we got some money from our own pocket and from some teachers and whoever could contribute, and we sort of modified those two schools. We put some better, slightly better furniture, devise some low cost furniture and some carpets and some little paint in these two schools, and then invited many other people in from the locality to those two schools, and those people were really happy to see what we had done, and they came forward with their contributions, with their donations, and with that donation we finally, I think over a period of a few months, have been able to provide these basic improved classrooms and basic furniture to around 6,000 kids in that subdivision. So this was the first thing we started with. The second thing we worked on was on teachers. What we realized that the place where I'm posted right now, this place, it's the social issues are quite huge. Pilwada district per se has one of the highest incidence of child marriage in the country. Still, say dowry deaths, a lot of superstitious activities. They keep on going there. And I remember just a few months back, there was one 8-month-year-old kid. He was suffering from pneumonia, and the parents did not take him to the hospital to be cured. They actually did a little they burnt his belly with hot wire. It's called a dam or dag here, so that he could be cured. So these are such horrific things which people still practice. So and these things are very much closely related to lack of education in the area. So that's why we thought the next part is that to ensure that somehow we build this community and bridge between the community and schools. And we used the teachers for this. That what we had seen was during my visits that in some places the schools were doing really good. Say in an area of around 5 square kilometers, there would be 4 schools, and out of those 4 schools, one school was doing really well. The kids were doing a lot of activity. They seemed to be more confident. We could see the campus was a little cleaner, classrooms were cleaner, and on looking at it deeper, we realized that the teachers who were posted there, they were motivated enough, and the teacher was the most important catalyst in this whole activity, whole work. So that's when we started to work on teachers. We tried to work on this idea of building teacher leaders. So the teachers who could not only who realize that it's their job is not only teaching certain mathematics or science to kids, but also to build a bridge between people and the students and school and the community, and also to take the responsibility of improving the school. And this has helped us a lot. We have done a lot of nudging activities with those teachers. We did a lot of surveys with those teachers, try to understand what the problems they are facing, and from administratively we try to help them out as much as we can. At the same time, we also implemented a couple of campaigns. One campaign was exclusively to combat the menace of child marriage, which is in the area. So we went from one village to other village, spoke to people there about the law which is in our country, about the ills of child marriage, try to both use all the techniques of say the what we say the threat of law, as well as motivation that they should not do it. Similarly, we also launched the awareness campaign about this about health awareness, why the superstitious activities like these dam and other things, they should not be done. And I think in the past few months, the impact has been largely visible. Very few child marriages were reported in the last season. I think we did not receive even a single in the last few months. Similarly, the other superstitious activities like this dog, and they have also gone down.
I mean, this explains the complexity of bringing about any kind of change in the country. I mean, just so inspired to have you on our podcast, and like we are just so lucky to have dynamic civil servants, IAS officers like you. And this podcast, Athar, will go out to hundreds of thousands of people who will be deeply inspired by what you do, why you do, and how did you basically repivot from an engineer trying to do what he was thinking about or trying to follow one path to really committing his life to making a difference. It's really been a pleasure, Athar. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.